What's that? Did I ever? Yeah, right down to the wood.
Oh, tough day then.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. and the live stream and recording has begun. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I see that we have quorum for this public meeting under the Planning Act for Wednesday, January 17th. I will now call this meeting into session. As we do with every meeting at the town, we have a land recognition statement read, and today Wayne Olson, well, Councillor Olson, I'm sorry, will have the privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor. I now turn to the clerk for opening remarks.
Thank you. Public meeting under the Planning Act, Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. The Town of Pelham is holding hybrid public meetings. A hybrid meeting involves a mixture of in-person and remote attendance and participation. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding each of the subject applications. Public meetings under the Planning Act are formal meetings requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak virtually or will be participating in person, you'll be provided an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca and this comment will be read aloud. Inappropriate comments will not be tolerated, and if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons will be asked to leave. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Contact information will follow on the presentations this evening. As well, you can find contact information on the Town of Pelham website. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to item number 3. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that the agenda be amended to include item 6.2.1. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not seeing any. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to a motion brought forth by Councillor Hildebrand that the agenda for the January 17th, 2024 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the agenda, any questions, comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor of the agenda? Any opposed? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. That brings you to item number 4, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item number 5, and I will read the opening remarks into the record. Town of Pelham applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, 1389 Effingham Street, file numbers OPAM-02-2023 and AM-05-2023. Official plan and zoning bylaw amendments to permit a farm winery with tasting and hospitality area and retail store on the subject property. The Planning Act requires under Section 26 and 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for informing the public in respect of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on December 15th, 2023. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. In addition to providing information, we'll also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk or planner in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will follow on the slides within the staff presentation shortly. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they're not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decisions have been made on the proposed amendments, and therefore, any comments received will be considered by council. To you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our senior planner, Ms. Shannon Larocque, with us to present this file.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Larocque, you have the floor.
There we go. It's working. Good evening, everybody. This public meeting is for property located at 1389 Effingham Street, and the applications before council tonight are for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. This property is located on the southeast corner of Highway 20 and Effingham Street. And the official plan amendment proposes to amend policy B2 1311G and H.
Wait.
Sorry to interrupt, Shannon. Do you want to share your screen for the presentation?
Sorry, it was up.
There you go.
There we go. The official plan amendment would amend the official plan to allow a minimum of 2.4 hectares of the land to be planted in vineyard and in full production, where the official plan typically requires 5 hectares. And it would also allow a maximum floor area of 550 square meters for buildings devoted to the farm winery use. The zoning bylaw amendment application would rezone the lands from the specialty agricultural zone and the environmental protection 1 zone to a site-specific specialty agricultural zone that would permit the winery along with the retail and tasting hospitality area. The environmental protection 3 zone would recognize the portion of the land that contains the environmental features and ensure that they are protected long-term. This is a site plan showing the development. It is a little bit difficult to read the text, but I'll try to use the mouse if I can to show the areas on the property. This is the existing house here, existing dwelling on the property, and this is the existing agricultural building in this location. The rear of this building would be used for the winery use, and the front portion would be used for the retail and hospitality and tasting area. In front of that building, there is a proposed outdoor hospitality and tasting area. And you can see the parking stalls are proposed to be located along the east side of the building and a little bit to the rear there, along with the septic system directly behind. The access to the winery would be from the existing driveway off of Effingham Street. There's no additional access proposed. And in the provincial policy statement, this property is considered a prime agricultural area and specialty crop area. In the Greenbelt Plan, it's protected countryside and specialty crop area. And in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, it's prime agricultural area, specialty crop area. Agricultural uses such as the growing of grapes are permitted in these areas, as well as agriculture-related uses and on-farm diversified uses, which include the winery, retail, tasting, and hospitality area. The policies for these areas require that these uses be compatible with surrounding agricultural operations. And on-farm diversified uses also have to be secondary to the principal agricultural use of the property and limited in area. There are portions of the provincial natural heritage system on this property as well. However, the proposed winery use will be located outside of those areas. The Niagara Region's official plan designates this property as being within the prime agricultural area, specialty crop area with a natural environment system overlay. all types, sizes, and intensities of agricultural uses are promoted and protected in these areas, and a full range of agricultural uses, agriculture-related uses, and on-farm diversified uses are permitted. Again, those uses are permitted, but they can't hinder surrounding agricultural operations. There are a number of additional criteria in the region's official plan to determine whether these uses are appropriate, and those include whether the use needs to be in close proximity to the agricultural operation, again, the compatibility with surrounding farms, the scale of the use, whether the character of that agricultural use is or agricultural area is maintained. The use can't generate off-site impacts. The activity can't include a new residential use, and the use can be serviced privately and doesn't require major infrastructure upgrades. The town's official plan designates this property as being within the specialty agricultural area with Greenbelt Natural Heritage Overlay. The development of farm wineries as a secondary agricultural use to the principal farming operation is permitted, subject to the policies in B21311. And again, this official plan amendment relates to policies, sections of that policy, G and H, as 2.43 hectares of the land is planted in vineyard and in full production, where a minimum of 5 hectares is typically required. And the proposed ground floor area for the winery is 520 square meters, where the maximum ground floor area permitted is 300 square meters. There are some other tests in our official plan that are to be considered when these uses are permitted. Those include that it's located on a farm, secondary to the agricultural operation, limited in area, and again, compatible with surrounding agriculture. The town's zoning bylaw, 4481/2022, zones the property specialty agricultural and environmental protection 1 at this time, with a Greenbelt Natural Heritage Overlay. The specialty agricultural zone does permit a farm winery, a brewery, or distillery. Agriculture-related uses can only be permitted in accordance with the regulations of 321 of the zoning, and those include that one agricultural use or agriculture-related use is permitted on the lot, and that ancillary, retail, and commercial sales are limited to the lesser of 50 square meters or a max of 10% of the gross floor area of the building. The zoning bylaw amendment would allow the 2 agriculture-related uses on the lot, the winery and the retail, along with a maximum combined floor area of 270 square meters for the retail and commercial. These are the zone regulations for farm wineries, breweries, and distilleries. You can see all of the provisions on this slide are compliant with this proposal, with the exception of that land area planted in vineyard. And further regulations for these types of uses on this slide, again, everything is compliant with the exception of the allowance for 2 agricultural related uses on the lot, as opposed to the 1 that's typically permitted. And again, everything is compliant on this slide in terms of regulations, with the exception of the maximum combined floor area for the ag-related uses being increased to 270 square meters. And again, the final regulations for ag-related uses, all compliant for this proposal. These applications were circulated to town departments and commenting agencies for comments, and these are the comments received to date. The Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority requested some further information from the applicants that there will be no adverse impacts along the slope from this use. Town Public Works provided comments that would be included as part of a site plan approval application in the future. Those comments were with respect to any modifications to the driveway and also the need for a road widening. Town Fire and Emergency Services had no comments on these applications, but they did note that fire suppression and emergency access will need to be addressed during the future site plan approval and building permit applications. And Town Building also had no concerns about these applications at this time, but noted that a change of use building permit would be required in accordance with the building code to change the use of this building from an agricultural building to a winery, retail, and hospitality use. And Enbridge Gas offered no objections. We did receive some public comments on these applications prior to this meeting as well. They were primarily supportive. Jeanette and Patrick O'Hara offered their support to the application. Richard Gretzinger also supported the application, indicated it was a welcome addition to the community. Renee Girard and Daniel Boudin felt that it was a positive change for the area. And Patrick Fuller provided some comments and concerns about the application. He was concerned about the encroachment of trails and the unauthorized use of his property, as well as impacts from the future use of the hospitality area for events, such as noise and other nuisances that might occur to neighboring property owners. And a number of technical reports were provided with these applications as well. Those include a planning justification report, an engineering report to deal with a septic system, a top of slope letter prepared by a geotechnical engineer, and a stage 1 archaeological assessment. These reports are available for viewing on the Town of Pelham's Engaging Pelham site. There's a project page, engagingpelham.ca/1389 Effingham Street. And in conclusion, there's no decision or recommendations regarding these applications tonight. We're here to receive any questions or comments on these applications. And once all of those questions have been reviewed and those comments and all information received, planning staff will prepare a recommendation report for council's consideration in the future. If anyone wishes to receive future notices on these applications, please ensure that you provide your contact information to me or the clerk's department, or sign the sign-in sheet here. And any questions or comments on these files can be directed to myself, Shannon Larocque, Senior Planner, telephone number 905-980-6661, or by email slarocque@pelham.ca. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Larocque, for your presentation. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have the agent for this file present with us today and will be presenting a presentation to further explain the applications. I believe the agent's name is Angela. Excellent, you can come on up to the podium.
There you go. Let's just hit the screen as you're going. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for appearing before council this afternoon.
Oh, thank you. Yes, as it was stated, I'm Angela Bonamici. I'm with Arcadis, formerly IBI Group, and I'm the agent on behalf of the Sons and Daughters Winery. And I'm here to just give a general overview of our proposal and discuss the OPA and ZBA that will be before you, and address any concerns that were brought up by the public. So the owners are Sons and Daughters, which was founded by Jeff and Anthony Hill, and they are the first winery in Font Hill. They have two vineyards. One is on Tice Road, and the other is along Effingham Street. And the Effingham Street vineyard is also the location for the proposed wine use. Here is the location map of the Effingham Road property. As you can see, it's highlighted in blue, and it just shows the surrounding uses, that there is a very eclectic mix of every type of use. There's agricultural and commercial to the north, rural residential, an aggregate pit, and agricultural to the west, rural residential to the south, and residential and commercial uses to the east. Here is an air photo of the property. It is 16.86 hectares in area, and it has dual frontage along Regional Road 20 of 214 meters and 400 meters along Effingham Road. And so here I'll just try to show you, we located where the single detached dwelling is. To the east of that is where the existing agricultural building is that will be home to the winery. There is an existing gravel driveway off of Effingham Road, Street, which will also be the entrance for the winery. And as you can see, in the northwest portion of the property is where the vineyards are for the subject lands. So as Shannon showed and everything, here's our proposed site plan. I have a zoomed in version to show the layout. The proposed winery, as Shannon mentioned in her presentation, is within the, oh, if I can get my mouse in there, is within this portion of the agricultural building. This is the tasting area and retail area, the outdoor seating, landscaped area, and parking along the eastern portion of the property. So the planning permissions, as Shannon already stated, in the Greenbelt, the PPS, the growth plan, and the regional official plan, this property is designated specialty crop area, which does allow for a full range of agriculturally related and on-farm production uses. Within the official plan, this land is specialty agriculture with the Greenbelt Natural Heritage Overlay. Within that, farm wineries are permitted use as long as they're secondary to the farm production. And they are subject, farm wineries are subject to a specific section of the OP, which lists a bunch of policy criteria to allow for that. Are two of those policies under that section is what is up for the official plan amendment. I will discuss that further down in the slides. And then within the zoning bylaw, the property is zoned specialty agricultural with an environmental protection zone 1. Within the zoning, a farm winery is permitted under the specialty agricultural zone. And once again, it does allow for agriculturally related uses, although there are site-specific provisions that will need to be modified to allow for this, but I'll get into that when I look at the amendments. So a policy summary of this project. This does have an on-farm diversified use. It will not encroach into the natural heritage portion of the property. It protects the agricultural viability of the specialty crop designation. It supports the agri-food network. It provides an appropriate scale to help strengthen the agricultural economy, and it is permitted use within the specialty agricultural designation. Here is just a landscape plan rendering of what the outside seating area will look. It's peaceful, it's not overwhelming with tables and everything. It looks to be seasonal, and it is very private, as you can see by the tree cover that would be to the east of the property, or west of the property. And at the moment, I think it's 6 to 8 picnic tables would be the amount of seating that would be provided outdoors. So the official plan amendment, we are asking for 2 modifications to the official plan. And the first one is the minimum size of 2.4 hectares for a farm winery instead of the required 5. This is due to the grapes come from 2 separate vineyards. One is on site and the other is off of Tice Road. When we do take the total of the vineyards, we do come over 5 hectares. However, the policy does specify that is to be on site. As well, the other modification is to the maximum ground floor area for the winery. We are asking for a 520 square meters instead of the required 300 square meters. This is due to being located within the existing agricultural building. So this is what we would kind of refer to as a technical amendment. We are meeting the overall intent of these 2 regulations. It's just because they have an assigned number of like 500 or 300 square meters and 5 acres. It's just not possible at this moment in time to comply with those regulations. For the zoning bylaw amendment, we are looking for the same of minimum land area for planted vineyards being 2.4 hectares instead of the required 5. The maximum number of agriculturally related uses, we're asking for 2 instead of 1. That includes the winery and the hospitality portion, the retail store and the tasting area. And then the maximum combined total floor area of 270 square meters instead of the 250 square meters. So this proposed development as it stands is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms to the Greenbelt Plan. It protects the agricultural viability of the specialty crop as it introduces a winery, retail, and wine tasting area. It conforms to the growth plan as it supports the agri-food network. It conforms to the regional official plan as it allows for appropriate scale of on-farm diversified uses, and it meets the intent of the official plan as it is a permitted use. I did just want to discuss the public comments that were received. We do thank you for the supportive ones, and with regards to the concern of the one neighbor, specifically, he had issues with trails and like encroachments onto his property. This is going to be rectified. We're gonna stop the encroachment portion. We might get a surveyor out on there so that the lines are defined. And essentially with the trails, when the winery gets up, they're not gonna be part of the winery business. It's to be a naturalized area. The noise for any events that are concerns for the neighbor, there is a noise bylaw that will be complied with. The owners are looking to be a positive business on the community. They're not here to hinder anybody's, like enjoyment of life. So it's to help, Fonthill and Pelham be great and not deter anyone's quality of life, especially their neighbors. And there was a comment about dirt bikes. This will be resolved. It's not the owners of this property. It is, a neighbor who requires it, but as well with the winery coming into play, the owners don't want dirt bikes running around the naturalized area as well. So all of this will be accommodated and rectified moving forward. So thank you. I can take any questions if there are any.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. I believe we hear other people, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. To the clerk.
Excellent, thank you. That brings us to the public portion of this application. Mr. Mayor, we do not have any pre-registered members of the public. However, you may open the floor to the in-person gallery for comments.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here present that would like the opportunity to speak to this application?
All right, sir, you may approach the podium. If you could please state your name for the record.
My name is Steve Matthews. I'm one of.
If you could just turn on the microphone, there's just an on button. It'll turn
There you
perfect.
go.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think I'm live now.
You are, thank you.
Generally, I like the sounds of all this. I'm one of the neighbors who is just the corner of my property is adjacent from Canberra Road property. I have a question. I think you've addressed much of what I had to say about noise and events and that sort of thing. The question I have, I avoided buying a number of properties because of basically bird bangers. I don't know what the plans are for those other cleared areas of the property. Are they just going to be renaturalized? Are they going to be planted as vineyards, or what's happening there?
Yeah, there might be there will be some more planting, but we don't.
I don't think council can hear the reply.
Partly, yes, we do plan to plant more. However, we've not used bird bangers to this point, and we don't intend to ever use them. Bird bangers aren't a perfect thing. They anger neighbors. And the Tice Road property is right on the 9th hole of Lookout Point Golf Course. So that one will get picked completely by birds without netting.
Right.
So we did netting this year as well on Effingham. If you notice the green netting on the grapes, we left it up there for
Yep.
a number of, probably about 6 weeks. And then Tice Road, everything was netted. So we don't own bird bangers, and we have no intent to ever use them.
Hallelujah? Is that the, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else present? Sir, come on, please approach the microphone. State your name, please.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Patrick Fuller. I have a speech impediment, so I hope that's okay. I live at 251 Canberra Road, and that's a property immediately adjacent to where the winery is. I just wanted to emphasize that the amendment asked that that there be a wine tasting or a facility, and that this be made available for the public. The website for the Sons and Daughters Winery, like it mentions that they can host up to 150 people, like groups for corporate affairs, like parties and all that. Now, that's in the website for the Sons and Daughters Winery, but it's not mentioned in the application for the amendment to the bylaw. So our concern is that if the wine tasting or a facility is approved, then this will lead to an expansion of the operation in a few years from now, say, where there are large numbers of people are at the facility. So I want to emphasize that my wife and I have no objection to a winery, but we do object to the wine tasting sort of facility where there will be large groups of people attending, and the parking proposed is not enough for 150 people. So I think this may be, if I can use the expression, the thin end of the wedge. So if the amendment is approved, then I predict that in the future there will be an expansion, and of course we live the winery machinery noise is quite extensive now, but it would be more the noise it would be more extensive if there's a wine tasting facility there.
Okay, thank you for voicing your concerns.
Okay,
and I will ask either the applicant or the presenter to address that.
Yes, I can address a portion of it. In terms of the wine tasting, I think what Mr. Fuller is referring to of what he does not want is an event space. I know on the website it does have reference to weddings and 150 capacity. That was kind of part of an overall vision, and it is a placeholder at this point. It's not allowed within the zoning bylaw. We're not requesting to have an event space at this point in time. Who knows what the future holds? Maybe we'll go for another amendment to get an event space in, but the wine tasting Obviously, based on parking and based on capacity, it cannot house a large event such as weddings or 150 people event. That would require a second application down the road. And it is a separate use from wine tasting. It's not, if you allow for wine tasting, you're not allowing for an event space to hold larger events. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. In terms of wine production noise, I can't speak to that. I don't know, but I assume that the production is happening during the day, within regular business hours, and that we aren't obstructing any of the noise bylaws with that. I'm not sure if there's any other way to mitigate the noise from that perspective, but yeah, unless you have anything to add.
Okay, thank you for that response. Thank you. Any other speakers? And yes, please approach the microphone and state your name.
Gay Fuller. Their website does say
Could you please state your name?
Gay
Oh, okay, thank you, thank you.
wife of.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Their website does talk about corporate events, that huge, why is that on a website then if it's not going to happen? Plus, there's another website, it's a party website, and it talks about the 150 party goers and all of the other business that's on. Why is it on the website then? If that's not the case, why is it advertised? That's all.
Okay, thank you. To the consultant.
I believe it was part of the marketing package that they received, and maybe it is their long-term vision, 10, 15 years. Nothing in the immediate future as it stands right now. This is about allowing for the winery and the hospitality use, not any weddings, not any corporate events. I understand the website does say weddings. It does direct you to one of the employees at the winery, and I'm sure he just informs you that it's not available at this time.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, to the town senior planner, Ms. Levac, the consultant mentioned that if they were to go to the 150 special events, would that indeed fall under a different permit?
You are correct, Mr. Mayor. At this time, the town's official plan permits an annual event on a farm property accessory to a farming operation, but it doesn't permit events more frequent than that. And of course, if a special event were being held, it requires a permit and approval from the town, at which point we would be looking at things like parking, access, restrooms, all of those key considerations.
Excellent.
Regular hosting of events on the site would require an additional zoning bylaw amendment, as Angela indicated.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
The website Invicta it advertises at a party venue. It has a calendar up on it. You can book beginning April 2024
Well,
for your party,
Yes.
for your 150 people.
yes. Well, all we can say is, go by what our planner is saying, that it comes under a different permit.
Well, then why is that allowed to be
Well,
up?
we can't control the website. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, sir. Please approach them. Yeah, that's you. Please approach the microphone and state your name.
Hi, Mark Engel. This will be a very quick, probably somewhat technical question. I understand that part of the land is to be rezoned EP3 from EP1. I was just curious why that was the case. It didn't quite come through in the presentations that we heard.
To the senior planner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Engel. The reason being that the property is within the Greenbelt Plan area, and the characterization of the features that was on site or were on site made it more appropriate that it be to an environmental protection 3 zone in the official plan policies. They're currently zoned environmental protection 1, The intention is that they retain an environmental protection zoning, and it would have the same protection whether it's environmental protection 3 or environmental protection 1. It was just more in line with the official plan policies.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or any other individual that would like to, that has questions or comments about the application? Going once, going twice. Oh, yes, someone at the back, please approach the microphone. State your name, please.
My name's Gail Savage, and I live directly across 1400 Effingham. So I'm looking right at where they're going to be building. I'm more concerned about what I'm going to be seeing. Right now, I have a beautiful view. Is it behind the trees? There's a big tree line there. Is the building behind the trees?
Yes, it is.
And the parking lot. I won't be looking at cars or anything.
No, the building already exists.
There's I know there's a house back there.
No, the building is also, I was at the building on Saturday.
I thought that was a house.
Well, there is a big house and there's also a building.
Okay, that's perfect. So I won't see any of that. I'm also concerned about the traffic. We're already dealing with water trucks, school buses, the students, and everybody seems to be using Effingham now. Like, we have to wait 5 minutes to get out of the driveway. It's continually heavy traffic all day long. Is it going to be worse? Are there going to be buses coming with loads of, tours and everything? Like, what are we dealing with?
Okay, I'll ask the consultant to address.
Just a couple more
Yep,
concerns.
go ahead.
The noise. Now, I know they're going to have music outside if they've got people eating, and it's all open fields, and the noise just travels. You can hear people on Canberra in our backyard in the evening. So how are they going to control the noise level,
No, again, I will turn to the consultant.
the noise level? Yeah, I think I'm finished. I don't object to more grapevines. That would be nice to look at, so. Okay.
And thank you for your questions.
So the hours of operation have not been yet set, but more so wineries, my experience, have been a weekend, midday type place to go. So with reference to students and buses, they would be like a compatible use. They wouldn't be fighting for the same time to be moving along Effingham. With regards to tours and that, this is the first winery in Fonthill. You're not on any wine path of tour or anything, so it's so removed from all the other wineries, it probably isn't advantageous to have tour buses come this way. The intent of the winery is to serve the community and enjoy and have a winery close to home and just enjoy that. Once again, with noise levels, they have to comply like anybody else to the noise bylaw. Noise levels for music and everything is not specific to zoning. That is its own separate bylaw, and obviously it works on a complaint basis. They will adhere to timing of that. So in terms of music, it's not going to be like a rock bar or something. If there's music, I'm sure it's probably a solo artist and a guitar, a quartet, that type of thing. It's not big amplifiers, not like that. And it's usually wineries close at a respectable time. So I would assume that the hours of operation for our winery will maintain that same, it's not like one of the big wineries that's out in Niagara Way that has all these big events. It's not going to be like that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments from any other residents? Going once, going twice. Okay. Oh, we have one more. So go ahead, sir. Again, please approach the microphone.
I don't know, Steve Matthews again. I don't know if I want to approach this subject or not, but I mean, as some of you know, I had enormous problems with a neighbor making noise, and the town of Pelham absolutely refused. Bylaw absolutely refused to have anything to do with it. So, I mean, I don't actually expect, from what's been said here, these people to be, harassing their neighbors, with big events and loud noise. But the idea that the town of Pelham would have anything to do, with controlling that is, to me, just, it's not going to happen. So I don't know what to say about that. I didn't really want to come and talk about it, but there it is.
So if I may, obviously, I know you, Stephen. I've been to your house, and I know your previous problem was with an individual neighbor. It was not with a business, correct? Yes, okay. I just want to point that out. Okay, and I appreciate your words. Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, not seeing any. I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 6:15 p.m. I have checked the emails and can confirm that we've received no emails. Therefore, you may close the public portion of the meeting and move to committee input.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I open it to the committee. Any questions, comments to the applicants? Councillor Kerr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. 2024 is my 45th year of dealing with the grape and wine industry in Ontario as well as internationally. So I've been through this before, and from the changeover of the industry back in the late 70s, early 80s, all the way through to suddenly the massive expansion of wineries, not only in Niagara, but across the entire province. The comments that are brought forward by the people are not unique to this particular situation. It's a common occurrence. Some of the things that I guess the questions I had were coming back to, and you made the comment, there's been no thing relative to operating hours, but I'm assuming they're going to at minimum have to follow the standards set out by the Liquor Licensing Board of Ontario, as well as the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. And the manufacturing license, the processing of grapes and the noise associated with it. Fundamentally, my experience, it's a 6-week window from beginning of harvest to the end of harvest, in which most of the work occurs outside. I would say the noise levels are not dramatically different than that of combine, corn harvester, tractors, other things that have to perform other agricultural operations during that similar window. After that 6-week window, the bulk of the activities are within the winery itself. Generally, its processing is the taking of grapes, the crush, the destem, you pipe, you pump, and then it goes into a tank internally. And it's somewhat quiet. If you talk to cellar people, they feel kind of lonely at times because they're doing a lot of things, but there's not a lot of noise. Small pumps, they're all electric, looking to minimize activity. The comment that was brought up about bird control, I worked with Ag and Food as a provincial specialist for a number of years, involved with that. Bird bangers have rarely went through with the design, setup, operation of them. There are always places that don't follow the rules and you have to go and clamp down, but there have been other practices, and as brought up was netting is probably the most dominant way now, in fact, of it's reducing losses. Even with the advent of bird bangers, people were still losing between 10 and 15% of their crop, and going to netting, they're now down to about a 5 or 6% loss. So, I mean, it's economic sense. If you don't have the grapes to harvest, then it's not worth having the business in the place in the first part. I guess my question was coming back to looking at some of the dimensions when I was looking at the official plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment, and then the official plan amendment, the sizes, and I was trying to go through the site layout, and I'm adding up the numbers from your slide 7, Angela, and I can't make it fit 520. I've got a proposed winery of approximately 250 square meters, a retail area of about 20 square meters, a tasting hospitality of roughly 80 square meters, a canopy and landscape area of 43 square meters, but then there's a seating area outside of 467 square meters on your slide. Like, that's over double the size of the actual winery itself. So the numbers didn't add up. I apologize for bringing it to you at this point, but it didn't work for me. And so I understand what you're asking for and the dimensions and the types of things, but it was just those things didn't kind of match where fundamentally what was going to be a hospitality, which is a seating area, was 467 square meters, which was even bigger than the winery, the retail, the tasting, and the existing canopy area. My question is, does this have to do with licensing for sale of alcoholic beverages on site by the Liquor Licensing Board and the LCBO, that you have to have a designated area for sales or not? I understand in terms of the actual tasting areas, because I've been through this, but you're added a proposed seating area. I'm assuming people are going to take wine, sit in that area, and drink. So in theory, it's going to have to be a licensed consumption area. And I'm not sure whether that's built into this equation. So that's my first question. I've got a couple others, but
Thank you.
that's where I was having troubles.
To the consultant?
I believe in terms of the picnic area, it's not part of the building. Like, I thought that's what the regulation refers to, is what is within the building and enclosed. With regards to consumption, that's not related to the zoning and OPA. That would be the liquor license and everything. So, granted, my numbers are screwy. I do agree with that. I don't know what happened there. But in terms of the picnic area and seating area, that, because it's outside of the building, it doesn't work with that modification, but it definitely does apply for the alcohol consumption. But
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
it was just, I'm trying to figure out how it got to 520 square meters for the official plan amendment. Like, is this trying to anticipate future expansion, or?
no, I believe the entire building was around 520. Shannon might know better than me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the requirements in the official plan and the zoning bylaw relate to floor area. So it really wouldn't consider outdoor tasting area in terms of our regulations. The outdoor tasting area was considered by the consultant when they were looking at the provincial guidelines on these types of uses, where they want you to look at a certain percentage of the lot to make sure that it's not exceeding how much gets used for these types of uses, and it did comply with that. I think it was 2% of the entire lot, that they don't want any exceedance of 2%, and that would include the winery, the tasting area, the retail, and these outdoor tasting areas as well. So the consultant did that analysis. All of that was compliant with provincial guidelines, but our requirements at the town, the zoning, and the official plan only relate to building floor area.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you. So I'll allow you one more question, Councillor, and then I'll go to the other councillors.
I guess my second question is coming back to what I call site ingress and egress. Understanding that large equipment has to move grapes, tractors, bins, vehicles traveling in two directions at the same time on a single lane pathway is generally not safe, not effective, and I'm concerned relative to the Effingham Road entrance and exit, that you have people trying to enter a single lane driveway at the same time the vehicles are trying to leave a single lane driveway. Also, the ability for equipment delivery, be they likely, if there's going to be bottling done on site, there's going to be a tractor trailer bringing things in. knowing the turning radius and everything else coming off of Effingham Street, I can almost guarantee you that a single width driveway is going to be insufficient for extremely large. So to me, but that's, I think, at the site plan point as much as anything in terms of dealing with that. But that's my only, in dealing with the number of wineries that I've dealt with within this province as well as other provinces. Openly, they've admitted that that was one of their biggest things, was that they hadn't taken that into account. So it's a suggestion going along. I understand where it fits. It's not really required under the zoning, but it would be under the site plan agreements that I think will have to be put in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Would you like to respond? Okay.
Yes, to that point, there will be a site plan after this application to go through, and I do believe the town has already pointed out of increasing the width onto Effingham Street to allow for the two-way traffic.
Okay, thank you. Anyone on this side, any councillors? Councillor Nisnik.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for our planner or Ms. Weens, our director. How many special event licenses can be given or provided to a business per year? Is there a limit, or is there not a limit?
To the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. Currently, the town's official plan has a policy that allows for rural properties, farm properties, to host one event a year, to be an annual event. And then anything more than that requires a zoning bylaw amendment. So that's the policy in the official plan. So we do have certain events that are held, and you'll recall the Fenwick Craft Fair, whatever it is. That's an annual event in June. So that's one that we have licensed. And then these tulip events, although they're one event over a number of weeks, and then that's it. They don't have multiple events for throughout the year. So those are the types of things that we've licensed for special events.
Good, so thank you very much. So that would be consistent. The winery would then also have to abide by that, be able to provide for one special event per year. And then other than that, if they wanted to have more, they would have to get another zoning bylaw amendment.
Mr. Mayor, through you, that's correct. And, I can certainly advise in other areas, other municipalities, they typically, if a winery if a winery wants to host events and that's part of their business plan, whether it's weddings or whatever, then typically that's particularly outdoor events, that's written into their zoning bylaw. There's usually a cap on the number of events, the time of year, and so forth that they can be held. Some places put a cap on the number of people that might be able to attend an event. Then again, that's tied to kind of the servicing capability of that site to accommodate those number of people. So there are different things that we look at if we were to look at zoning for a special event. And certainly the impact on adjacent properties is, a significant consideration. In a former life, I dealt with this a lot. And certainly, people want to be able to have the use and enjoyment of their backyards and not necessarily be inundated with, wedding events every weekend in the summer months, for example. And so there are different things that municipalities can do to try to manage that and to work with proponents to, again, manage the impacts on adjacent land uses. And, in this particular area, we do have a number of rural residential properties that abut this property. So anything with respect to special events, we'd have to take that into consideration.
Thank you. And I just have one more question.
Yep,
I guess
go
it
ahead.
would, it would be either for maybe the presenter or the applicant presenter. So we did receive a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Fuller with regards to their concern about the encroachment, and that they had several conversations with the owners, and no changes really had taken place to point. So you did address that those will be taking place. So I'm just wondering, what is your plan in order to secure that property line for Mr. and Mrs. Fuller moving forward?
To the applicant, or to the presenter? Oh. No. Please state your name.
Sorry, Anthony Hall, applicant. Just to address that, I had a conversation with Mr. Fuller in 2021, I believe, about the footpath encroaching on his property. At that point, we don't use that path anymore, but I understand that it's still accessible, and there are a number of people that do still use the property and ride dirt bikes on it and whatnot. And I allowed that to go on because I thought it was neighborly, but at this point and moving forward with the application, we'll make sure to address that with anybody else who's still using the property. And our intention would be to have a surveyor mark that line. So if we did want to reroute that footpath, we would do so at that time. And I just want to address in terms of any concerns about noise from Mr. and Mrs. Fuller or from yourself. I live directly beside the winery on the property, and I have, 4 young children under 10, and I don't want to be a bad neighbor, and I don't want to make noise that's going to affect my family as well. So we're going to do everything we can to be the best business we can for the community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Sorry, did that address?
Yeah, I think so. As I said, it looked as though it appeared that you had a conversation, but then had made no changes. So just as you say, moving forward, I would highly recommend, if that's what you've said, you're going to reroute that, and then, or make sure that it's respected, that property line, please.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. This side, any other comments, questions? Go back to Councillor Kerr.
Just as a follow-up, and I'm assuming it'll come back to the site plan, the capacity, I guess looking from septic, sewage, that type of thing, because there's no sewers on site, that would be addressed to make sure the capacity not only for processing materials are handled correctly, but also human, be it tasting areas and everything else. I know that in some areas had become an issue as well. So I'm, again, is probably likely more at the site plan level to make sure that those types of things are addressed. I think it's an opportunity for the town in terms of having a licensed winery within the legal boundaries, maybe, which is kind of nice of the town of Pelham, not just Fonthill. In fact, it's Ridgeville more than it is Fonthill. I'll push that, taking it into account, showing my parochial nature and going back to, there's Fenwick, there's Ridgeville and Fonthill. And for those of you who ask otherwise, there's also Pelham Corners. So with that in mind, I think it's a good movement. It's like the logistics of anything, of working out the parameters to make sure it fits with everybody that surrounds. The comments by Anthony about living there. I know people that live next door to wineries in Aragon Lake, and they had an issue where people were doing wandering that had challenges that they had to deal with. And I'm suggesting to you that you'll want to take care of those types of things as well. That this is just a little piece of observation which will address your neighbors as well as others. And I think, as you say, people are using a path right now, but from a legal standpoint, the liability aspect on you of having people traversing your property, and if they break their leg, they can sue if it's not marked, and those types of things we're all aware of. Farmers have this kind of back thing that a lot of people use their property thinking it's part of nature, but it's a private person's property, and I think you want to make sure you fulfill that. So with that, I'll That's it. I think that they've done a lot of work on this, and it's worthwhile.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson?
I believe it's correct to say that you have a sewage permit that was issued by the region, is that correct?
Yes, we've completed an aqua wetland system,
Yeah. Oh,
which is a pretty exhaustive practice, and we have that installed.
okay, thank you, that was all.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, I'd like to ask one to the consultant presenter. I know you're right next to a natural heritage system. Obviously, you've had numerous talks with the NPCA, I assume, and at one point in our town planners, or maybe it was your presentation, there was more information needed about some slope guarantee, no damage. Has that been looked after, or have you been, or what's the status of that?
Yes, it has been looked after, and I feel that it was just the word choice. The consultant wrote in their report that no adverse impacts will affect the top of bank slope. And so what the NPCA wants to confirm is that the entirety of the slope will be no effects to it, which the top of the slope is the most westerly point. So how I read it is top of the slope will be maintained. Everything east of it will also be maintained. So we're just going to get the consultant to kind of just confirm that and provide it when our response to all back to the town.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Without seeing any other questions, I turn to the clerk.
Mr. Mayor, that brings us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that committee receive report 2024-18 for information as it pertains to file numbers OP-AM-02 2023 and AM-05 2023, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any further comments or questions on the resolution before us? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. Resolution carries. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Not seeing any on this motion. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed. Motion passes.
And I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the verbal presentations made by the public. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed. Motion carries.
Excellent, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our next item on the agenda, being item 6, and I will now read the opening remarks into the record.
So perhaps before we continue, if anyone wants to exit, don't disrupt the meeting. Thank you. Yeah. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, our next application is Town of Pelham Housekeeping Zoning Bylaw Amendment. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of the statutory public meeting was published on December 15th, 2023 on the town's website and social media platforms, on the housekeeping amendment project page on Engaging Pelham, and posted on the Voice of Pelham's website at pelhamtoday.ca. Additionally, a copy of the notice was emailed to all interested stakeholders who had provided contact information during the creation of the town's new zoning bylaw in 2022 via the public information sessions, through Engaging Pelham, and at the public meeting or through direct contact with planning staff. As well as members of the public who were in attendance at the first public meeting on this amendment on October 11th, 2023, or those who provided comments or requested information from staff. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any members of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible in writing as soon as possible. Contact information will appear on the town's website, as well as displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation shortly. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decisions have been made on the proposed amendments, and therefore any comments received will be considered by council. To you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our policy planner, Lindsay Richardson, with us this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson, you have the floor.
Okay. I think everything's good. And thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, fellow town staff, and members of the public.
I'm sorry, you're not sharing your screen.
Am I not? Oh, I should be. What am I doing? Uh-oh. Jody. Is it? Because it came up.
Perhaps, Jody, you can try sharing it from your computer.
Okay. Let me close it and try again. Nope. I was doing so well. Yeah, okay.
I'd come down and help, but I wouldn't be any.
That's okay. We'll have Ms. LeGros share it from her screen just a moment.
I'm just gonna try one more time. No. Okay. Thanks, Jody. I mean, you guys all saw this in October, so.
You know what? I've got it working on my end, so I will share this for you. Oh, where are we? Here,
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good. All good? Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So just a project overview. The town zoning bylaw was approved by the OLT in April of last year now. Save and accept some site-specific lands identified in Appendix A of the decision. As town staff have had the opportunity to monitor and actually use the new zoning bylaw, items have been identified for change to clarify regulations, provide consistency, and improve the functionality of the overall document. Next slide, please. The proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment applies to most sections of the zoning bylaw, including the definitions, parking, and land use sections, and affects essentially all lands in the town of Pelham, except that area that's subject to Niagara Escarpment Development Permit Control, and the area that is under appeal. As the clerk had mentioned, this housekeeping amendment is considered a town-wide amendment and could have potential impacts on any property within the town. As such, notice of the statutory public meeting was posted on the town's website and social media platforms, on the housekeeping amendment project page at Engaging Pelham, and it was posted digitally at pelhamtoday.ca. Additionally, a copy of the notice was emailed out to all interested stakeholders who had provided contact information during the creation of the new zoning bylaw, and as well as from the previous meeting, and pretty much anyone that had any sort of contact with staff. This is generally a standard procedure when a Planning Act application is applicable to the entire town. And this also does meet the regulatory requirements as outlined in the Planning Act. Additionally, these applications were circulated to all applicable agencies and town departments. We have received a few comments back from agencies that were received after we had the report drafted. Those have been included in the agenda package as well. We did receive some public comments that, again, were received after we had the report prepared. Those are also included in your agenda package. Next slide, please. So the Planning Act enables council to pass and consider amendments to the zoning bylaw in order to regulate the use of land and the location, height, bulk, size, floor area character, and use of buildings and structures, as well as parking and loading requirements and lot requirements. The proposed changes that we are sharing with you this evening have been reviewed within the context of all applicable provincial, regional, and local policy documents and are in keeping with the policies outlined in these documents. Next slide, please. So as we sort of chatted about in October of last year, we are proposing some changes to the majority of the sections in the zoning bylaw. So in terms of definitions, we're looking at rewording some definitions for better clarification, and also the introduction of some new definitions to, again, better clarify or describe uses and terms within the bylaw. In section 3, which is our general provision section, we're looking at some amendments to several sections in order to improve clarity and consistency. In section 4, which is the parking, we're specifically looking at some reductions in the minimum dimensions for tandem parking that will be in keeping with the front yard setbacks of the residential zone regulations. Also looking at, and this is a new one that came up between the October meeting and tonight, we're looking at a reduction in the number of spaces for greenhouses and hoop houses, parking spaces, to better align with the needs of the use. And also looking at a decrease in the number of bicycle parking spaces required for apartment units, clarification on the location for indoor bicycle parking. The proposed changes are actually detailed in a lot more detail in the planning report. There's also a change chart, which is attached as Appendix A to the report, that goes through all of the specific changes. Since that initial meeting in October of last year, and based on the feedback and comments that we received at that meeting, further staff review, and further comments from the public, we are recommending a few additional changes, which are detailed in the report. The first is specific to some of the height requirements in the commercial zones, with the proposal being to increase these heights in order to accommodate various building design and roof pitch options for development. Again, as I mentioned, another proposed changes for the decrease in the number of required parking spaces for commercial greenhouse operations. Additionally, since the writing of the report, staff is also proposing an additional change to the definitions section to recognize and define environmental impact study. There's currently no definition for that. Next slide, please. So the changes that we're looking at in sections 5 through 8, which is our agricultural, residential, greenfield, and commercial zones, just some minor amendments to clarify some setback and height requirements, and minor changes to reflect the policies from Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act in 2022. In section 9, we're looking at modifications to permitted uses within the EP2 and EP3 zones to align with the town's official plan policies. And in section 10, the reintroduction of some approved site-specific amendments that were not carried forward. Additional changes that we have identified from the previous public meeting also include a proposed deferral of the changes to the setback and frontage requirements that were originally proposed at the October public meeting for the R1 zone. And that's based on feedback from the public meeting. Staff is also proposing some minor changes to the various requirements for the apartment dwellings in the institutional zone to ensure a more compatible use. And a final proposed modification that's being brought forward by staff is a modification to the requirements in the environmental protection zones to ensure that any changes or modifications to setbacks that are identified in the EP1, EP2, and EP3 zones that are approved by an environmental impact study will be subject to a written agreement to be registered on title to ensure that the owner of the property will be legally responsible for implementing the recommendations contained within that EIS. Other than these specific changes I've noted, the other proposed housekeeping amendments remain as the same as those outlined in the previous public meeting in October. Next slide, please. All right, so that concludes my brief presentation. Just like to reiterate that no decisions or recommendations concerning this amendment have been made or will be made this evening. And following the review of comments received, a recommendation report will be prepared for Council's decision at a later date. So please ensure that you provide your contact information if you do wish to receive future notices. And last slide, it's the important one, it's my information. No, thank you all for participating. And if anyone does need information or more information, I am the girl that you want to chat with, and I can be reached at probably email is the easiest, and it's just lrichardson@pelham.ca. So thank you again, and yeah, I welcome any questions or comments or feedback.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your mic on. Thank you for your presentation, and I turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a number of pre-registered speakers this evening, so we will begin with Mark Engel and Jennifer Moore. If you could please turn on the microphone before proceeding with your comments.
Thank you, sir.
Should have moved it before I turned it on. Sorry about that. Hi, Mark Engel here, and this is my wife, Jennifer Moore. So by way of introduction, we are keen to move to Pelham to join the community here. I grew up in West Lincoln near Caister Centre, went to school in Smithville. I retired a couple of years ago, and we're looking to leave the big city and come back to someplace closer to home. My father still lives in West Lincoln at the Hobby Farm, and my sister has the adjoining or the adjacent property to ours on Effingham Street. So I'd like to speak briefly about two subjects tonight. One, which is the process that created the current EP zoning schedule, and then the other is the suggested changes to EP2 and EP3. So I've got two handouts. Don't worry, you only need to look at the pictures in one of them at least. Unfortunately, we underestimated the popularity of the meetings, so we only have 15 handouts, so I apologize for that. So while Jennifer hands those out, I'll just get started. So first, we've got two issues with the process that created the current EP zoning schedule. So in short, we weren't told about the changes, and as far as I can tell, council was not fully informed either. And so while maybe this seems like a very settled thing to a lot of people, it came as a bit of a surprise to us a couple of months ago as we were going through our building process. So let me give you, just to back that up, let me give you just a short chronology to review what information council was given and to make sense of that. So the previous zoning bylaw was passed in 1987. In this bylaw, almost all of the rural areas were zoned agricultural A, and this bylaw really was overdue for rewrite, no question about that. The official plan was approved in 2014. The environmental protection zones were introduced. The Addendum 3, which is the top page in the handout that you've just got, shows the EP zone or the EP schedule from the official plan. Please note that the color scheme is different from the official plan, but the areas marked are materially the same. So that's sort of the starting point in the official plan. So town council was briefed on the upcoming zoning bylaw rewrite in 2016. A motivating factor, like some of tonight's changes, was to align the bylaws to the OP. Council was shown an EP zoning schedule in that briefing that was the same as the one that you're looking at that's in the OP. The comprehensive zoning bylaw was brought to council in March of 2022. The same schedule was included in that document sent to council. Again, the one Schedule 3 that you're looking at. Information was sent out to key stakeholders, Todd Barber, lots of others. Public meetings and information sessions were held in April, sort of just after the documents were brought to council in March. Again, the same schedule was shown to everyone. Public meeting was then held on June 13th, 2022. At that point, there's a new zoning schedule dated June 3rd. That was page 232 out of 238 in the updated draft comprehensive zoning bylaw. That's shown on the next page, which is addendum 4, if you want to flip that over. So the light green and the dark green are the two interesting colors. Light green is EP3, the dark green is EP1. So the new schedule introduces or increases the amount, I beg your pardon, of EP1 on I counted 604 properties. So this is a big change. If you go to addendum 5, again, just flip over to the next page, you'll see two close-ups from the schedule. So the one is just the very, very north. The first one you see is the very north part of Pelham. And there are the top, if you have to turn it sideways, the top map shows the one that was in the OP and the one that was socialized through the process, that was brought to council, that was sent out to stakeholders. The one below it is the one that appeared in June. And what I've done is put a little black dot in each of the properties that has more EP1 in it in this new version. And so in the first picture, you'll see 45 black dots. In the second one, which includes our property, you'll see 64 little black dots. So there were 60 properties I counted that moved to 100% EP1. Which is the most restrictive zone. Our property went from 0% EP1 to 100% EP1. So the comprehensive zoning bylaw was then brought to council in July of 2022. Council was shown the new schedule. So the material changes to the 604 properties, all of the ones that had increased EP1, was not mentioned in the staff report, nor were the hundreds of properties that are affected indirectly through setbacks or directly but through setbacks. However, the staff report does mention that 98 Effingham Street moved from EP2 to agricultural. So one property being downgraded from EP2 to agricultural rated mention in the staff report, 604 properties that moved up, again, including 60 that moved to 100% EP1, was not mentioned in the staff report. So this new schedule, as you can see, if for no other reason, looking at these 604 properties, this new schedule is very much out of alignment with the official plan. So if the objective was to align with the official plan, that's not what happened. So it's hard to reconcile this last-minute change with informed decision-making, good governance, and transparency. So that's my first issue with the process, that it isn't clear that council was given the information to make an informed decision. So my second issue with the zoning process was that there was no direct notification when our property was proposed to move from agricultural A to EP3 and specialty, which was in the first version, or when it was to be moved to 100% EP1. So as we saw in the previous agenda item, there was a relatively, I mean, there was more than that, but there was relatively minor rezonings taking place on one property, and everybody within 120 meters was notified and asked for comment. So our property was rezoned to 100% EP1, which means we cannot build, and we weren't notified or asked for comment. And I think, I mean, zoning is done, or this zoning isn't done frequently. The last time a big zoning rewrite was done was 35 years ago. It was 87 to 2022. So I personally think that justifies a more direct consultation process, and more than, you know, the minimum required by the provincial legislation. So again, to be clear, our issue isn't that the zoning changed. It was due for a change. Our issue is that we weren't notified, and it's not completely clear to me that council was made aware of very material last-minute changes to the schedule, which again was page 200 and, I forget what it was, 232 out of 238. So you would have really had to look carefully and compare it with the version from March to see that the colors had changed, really to appreciate that there was a difference. So now our entire property is zoned EP1, and we just found that out, I think, was it November? Anyway, so we just found it out recently. So again, this may be old news to everybody else, but it was kind of a surprise to us when we were informed that we were unable to build on our property. I'd add that we bought the property in 2019, and we checked with the town and with the NPCA before we bought the property, that we would be able to build. And the planning department acknowledged that in the report, in today's report, that we were in fact permitted to build. So we've been thinking about, so that's the challenge, and then what do we have for suggestion? So we've been thinking about the best remedy for the situation. So the simplest remedy would be to request zoning our entire property back to agricultural. However, in good faith, we recognize that there are some environmental features that should be considered. There's a decent-sized wetland on the property, and on the west side of the property, there is a relatively old forest. So I think those are substantial features that should be taken into account. The eastern section of the property is actually an overgrown orchard, and that's the part where we're looking to build, or where we would like to build. So we think that there may be a solution where there's some kind of rezoning on the eastern side of the property, possibly with setbacks modified to be consistent with the NPCA requirements. We can believe that all that development can be done without any impact to the more important environmental features, being either the wetland or the older growth forest on that part of the property. So our request is that we instruct staff to work with us to find a solution, something of this nature, with appropriate zonings and setbacks that would allow us to build. So that's the first and most important request. So we could discuss now. I do have another issue. It's a shorter one, I promise. So I could talk about the second one, or do we want to, I don't know how you would like that to work. Okay. So I'll go
Sorry.
on then.
So we usually finish all the presentations, and then we go for questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep.
I'm new here.
Okay.
Okay, so the second issue is removing single detached dwellings from the permitted uses for EP2 and EP3. So we do mention this in our submitted comments, but I'd like to reiterate because I think it's quite important. So the housekeeping amendment proposes to remove, among other things, single detached dwelling as a permitted use from EP2 and EP3. And this is said to be in keeping with the permitted uses for these map features in the town's official plan. So I've got three issues with that I'll step through. First, as you'll see in the other handout, without all the pretty pictures, we'll see that single detached dwelling is a permitted use for EP2 and EP3 in the official plan. If you look at the first page, the two columns show permitted uses for EP2, both in the zoning bylaw and in the official plan. All that was pulled off the Pelham sites. And then the second table shows the same thing for EP3. So the EP3 language in the OP and the official plan isn't quite as simple as it is in the as it is in EP2, or as quite as simple as it is in the zoning bylaw. However, it's still very clear, and this is, you'll see that on the second page, or somewhere in the second and third, that single detached dwellings are permitted in the OP, and there's even language, specific language in the OP about that permits expansion of detached dwellings. So the proposed amendment would put the zoning bylaw out of alignment with OP, not bring it into alignment with OP. So that's my first issue. Second, there are dozens of houses and yards in Pelham that are zoned EP1. So if an owner wants to put an addition on their house or a garage in their yard, and they're EP1, one of the approaches that they have is to correct the zoning schedule and have part of the property, I mean, because it's a yard, it's not a nationally significant feature, is to have part of the property rezoned EP3. And so removing these permitted uses from EP2 and EP3 also removes a potential right of use for EP1 users, because they won't have that option of having part of their property downgraded to an EP zone that would allow them to do that. I guess they would need to have it downgraded to agricultural, which seems more of a challenge, and I'm not sure that's really the intention. Third, this seems like, to me, a very material change for a housekeeping amendment. The proposed changes remove all rights for any construction within any EP zone. And as we noted earlier, none of the owners have been notified of this material zoning change that would potentially affect their property. And again, I'd compare this to the neighbors of 1389 Effingham, who were notified of a relatively minor rezoning nearby. Just a last comment on the subject. So we've all heard of environmental impact studies. I'd like to suggest a zoning impact study where we understand a few basic facts about zoning changes before they're approved, like who is affected and how are they affected. So in this instance, we should probably know how many EP2 and EP3 properties are directly affected by this change. You know, how many EP1 properties might be indirectly affected because they wouldn't have the option to have part of their property downgraded. What is the impact on the affected properties? Like if you've got a house and you want to put an extension on your house, or you want to build a garage on your yard, what does this mean? So I think these are things that I would certainly want to know if I were supporting these zoning changes. And that kind of information around the Big Act, where it said, you know, there are 604 properties that are changed between the OP and what we're approving. I mean, if that, you know, little bit of information been there, maybe that's a change everybody would have decided to make, maybe not, don't know, but that information wasn't put there to highlight that this affects a material number of properties. You know, pay attention here, this is a thing. Anyway, so my request here is three quick, much smaller requests. One is do not remove detached single dwellings from permitted uses from EP2 and EP3, and consider these changes with a broader update of the official plan that is in progress that was kicked off last summer. Two, conduct something like a zoning impact study so that there's a clear understanding of, you know, who would be affected and how, and that's probably just a one-page addition. And three, I would suggest that you notify the property owners that they're about to lose any, you know, any ability to put a building or any of the other changes on their site. So the first ask was really the one that, you know, obviously that I care about the most, the one that I'm most keen on, which is really for council to support us in the ability to build on the site and instruct staff to work with us to find something that, you know, is good for the town, good for the environment, and works for everyone. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Engel. I turn to the clerk.
Through Mr. Mayor, our next public speaker is Stephen Kaiser, and Mr. Kaiser is joining us via Zoom this afternoon. If you could allow Jody a moment to bring him into the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Kaiser. We do see you've joined the meeting. If you could unmute yourself and proceed, please.
Good afternoon, Stephen. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I think most of you know who I am, but for my record, Stephen Kaiser. I spoke to you October 11th regarding the amendments to the current zoning bylaw, and I'm back again with some concerns. A little bit of background, members of council. Most of you have known me longer than I've been involved in this industry. I've been dealing with issues impacting our industry for 38 years, involved with the land development and construction industry. I've been dealing with issues at the town of Pelham for the same 38 years. 9 different councils here, and obviously a number of different senior staff over the years. I will say, looking back, that I think you have a great team today on board at the town. My first representation of the town was in 1986. And at that time, we were dealing with the zoning bylaw, which was then passed in 1987. Since then, I've played a number of different roles, advising the then mayor in confidence on the purchase of 32 acres in East Font Hill, chairing the ad hoc committee on the purchase, or chairing the ad hoc committee of council with members of council in terms of where the new community center should go, coordinated a group of local developers working with the town over a number of years to complete the East Font Hill Secondary Plan, assisting in the development of the MCC, and numerous other deputations over the years. I want you to note that both Barb and Lindsay have worked with me trying to understand my concerns in regards to the amendments. We even had a Zoom meeting with an architect to give us all a better perspective of what I was trying to portray. The home building industry is complicated. I'm still learning new things, and as you know, it's undergoing a substantial amount of change. Zoning is all about details, and after working with a zoning bylaw that was almost 40 years old, it's important that we get it right, both the town and for the development community. Essentially, my concerns are largely the same. Height, the definition has been changed, but there's still some ambiguity that I've shared with Barb and Lindsay, and I believe there may be some changes there. Bicycle parking, although not a big issue, I do believe there'll be some changes in terms of what you're looking at here and now. I think Lindsay would say there's actually a switch between short-term and long-term in what's being presented. The increase in height is moving in the right direction, but it still needs work. Some of the areas are not congruent when you look at what the minimum floor is mandated to be in terms of height, and then the built form that the town wants to achieve. So we're close, but we're not quite there. The village commercial zone is of importance to me. We own property on Station Street, and I've been waiting for almost 10 years for the official plan and the zoning bylaw to be congruent. And I realize staff is working on that, but we may be able to shorten that process, and that's been discussed with staff also. The institutional zone is really what I'm focused on. In the new designation, a number of the new designations non-residential, you'll see that there's now the stories are spelled out and or the number of stories and the number of meters in terms of height. In the institutional zone, there's been no change whatsoever. It still is simply 15 meters if the use is an apartment dwelling. Also, in terms of coverage, the village commercial has no restriction in terms of coverage, as does the Main Street, the Town Square zone, the Downtown Corridor zone, and yet the institutional has a 50% restriction for coverage, and now there's a movement to move it to 40%. That's not conducive with the province and region's goals of intensification. My point is there should be no coverage restriction. Coverage is determined by side yard setbacks, front yard setback, rear yard setback, height, parking, all those other things working within a space that is often very different from development to development. The last point refers to the area for required unit. Again, there's no restrictions in any of the other zones. And my point would be that that should be eliminated also. Again, that's determined by the same items I just listed off. I guess in conclusion, I'd say, especially in terms of the institutional zone, this exercise is about planning. It's not about politics. It's not about pleasing neighbors. It's about finding what works for the town of Pelham. We ran a development on Welland Road, which was contentious. I will grant you that. It was passed by your committee of adjustment. We received the minor variances we needed. And I know from conversations with individual councilors, there was a belief, as we believed, if we had to go to the tribunal, that development would have been passed and would have been approved by the tribunal. So I'd like council to look at how do we get intensification as opposed to how do we stop intensification. It's a movement from the federal government, from the province, from the regional government, and now that we get to this level, let's not find ways to put brakes on it. Let's find ways to build different types of housing in our neighborhoods that can be homes to a number of people here in the town of Pelham. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Stephen, for joining us this afternoon. I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our next public speaker is a representative of PATH. I'd welcome Dawn to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Please come up to the mic and state your name. Oh, and you got to turn the microphone on. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. My name's Don Campbell. I'm a resident of Font Hill. But tonight I'm here to speak on behalf of the Board of Directors of PATH, the Pelham Advocates for Trees and Heritage. Now, to start off, I'd like to emphasize that PATH is not anti-development. We recognize the need for development for housing and for jobs. What we're concerned with is promoting responsible development that balances that need for housing and jobs with the protection of natural heritage and the natural environment. Okay, now I would note that PATH does plan to submit written comments on the proposed housekeeping amendments. Tonight, we just want to outline some of our concerns and pose some questions for staff for clarification that will help us in formulating our response to the proposed amendment. And I think at this point, most of our comments are related to proposed changes in the general provisions of the bylaw. First of all, it's proposed that the Fenwick urban area boundary be exempted from requirements for setbacks for EP1 and EP2 zones. And we'd like a clearer understanding of what the intent is with this proposal. Wouldn't the lands within the urban boundary still be subject to these setback requirements? For example, if there was a residential zone that was abutting the urban area boundary and there was a woodland or wetland on the other side of the boundary, wouldn't that development still be subject to the setback requirements? Secondly, we are glad to see the addition of significant woodlands to the chart in section 331.1A of the bylaw, which would introduce setbacks for significant woodlands. This would address some of the recent issues we've had with development adjacent to woodlands in Pelham. And we are expecting that that would set a 50-meter setback requirement for significant woodlands, which is similar to the setback for other types of natural heritage features. A third concern is with the removal of the requirement for site plan control within the Greenbelt Natural Heritage System. We understand why this is being proposed, that it's due to changes in provincial legislation. But it is a real concern to us. It appears that the requirement that is in the existing bylaw was placed there in order to implement policies in the community's official plan, policies that were designed to ensure that natural heritage was not adversely affected. So we would really like to see that looked into more closely and And this might be something that would be in conjunction with the official plan review to see what tools, what instruments can be used to implement those official plan policies if it's no longer possible to use site plan control. So those are our comments at this point, and we would appreciate clarification to a couple of the points that I've raised, especially with respect to the Fenwick urban area boundary. And
Sorry, thank you. So thank you for your presentation. If you, I guess we could, do we ask staff to address them now, or you are going to make a written proposal or a written submission? Do you want to meet with staff after you've made that submission, or I'll go to the clerk.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure that staff are keeping a list of comments for this evening, and following the public portion of the meeting, they may wish to respond to those comments.
Okay, so we'll continue on with the public portion of the meeting, and then we'll address your concerns.
certainly, and I think it might be useful for us to meet or speak with staff to clarify some of these questions.
And let me, the Director of Planning, would that be suitable with staff?
Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly, we are happy to meet with Mr. Campbell and other members of PATH, as well as anyone on this bylaw. So yes, at any time, we're happy to meet.
Great, thank you. Perhaps that is the better way to go then, perhaps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. And I should say on behalf of PATH, that we're very happy to see the proposed housekeeping amendments and supportive of many of them.
Excellent. And
going in the right direction.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does conclude our pre-registered public speakers. However, I do know there are some speakers in the gallery that may wish to come and present.
Okay. Is there any other residents in the gallery that would like to speak at this time? You approach the microphone, sir, and state your name. Yep.
Jason Wieringa. Good evening, Mayor Junkin, council, and town staff. I live on a farm in North Pelham, and I operate that farm with my family and my cousin's family. We have 7,700 square meters of greenhouses, and our site plan agreement allows for the addition of another 9,000 square meters. So this relates to the housekeeping. I'm pleased to see that staff recommendation to decrease the number of parking spots for our type of agricultural building. It was, or is, 55 meters, and you need one spot. Proposed is 1,000, and I think that's much more reasonable and reflects the actual use of our buildings and property. So I commend staff for doing a good job in matching rules with reality. So we have the site plan agreement, and it allows us to build an additional 9,000 square meters. If I were to do that, I don't want 9 more employees. So maybe 1,000 meters is a move in the right direction. Maybe it still does not accurately represent actual needs, but it's much better than 55. I also think this change could be applied to other agricultural uses. As I understand it, other farm users outside of greenhouses are still bound to the 55 square meters per parking spot. So if I was a chicken farmer, that would be a problem. If I built a kind of normal sized barn, 40 by 400, by my math, I would need 27 parking spots. And that doesn't sound right. So I would encourage staff and council to consider other agricultural buildings and the parking, not just greenhouses. And then moving on to a second point beyond parking, there is a proposal to add the word commercial to the definition of greenhouses. And I agree, it's good to differentiate commercial greenhouses like we have versus hobby greenhouses. The two are very different. But I have a problem with the term commercial, and I propose to use the term agricultural instead of commercial. OMAFRA guideline publication 851, Kevin might know, says that greenhouses and on-farm buildings are permitted uses. So I think if you use the word agricultural instead of commercial, nobody is going to be confused, and it would better represent the differences. For sure, somebody that has a small greenhouse on their property and they want to start their vegetables a little bit earlier, get a jump start on those tomatoes, would not be called agriculture by any definition. And similarly, if you had a plant collector who had a conservatory type of greenhouse, there would be no confusion. No one would call him or her a farmer. So, yeah, think of this suggestion about using agricultural instead of commercial. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak to this council and the staff. I welcome involvement for future issues with greenhouses. I'm in Pelham to stay for a while. So I'm open to comments and questions on future issues. I know there's a future issue pretty big for our industry coming up about lot coverages for greenhouses. It's on page 104 in your agenda, where council is recorded as being supportive of the reduction of lot coverage requirements. So when that issue comes to the front, me and others would be happy to engage on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's anyone else in the public gallery that wishes to make comments, you're now welcome to the podium.
Okay, I don't see anybody else approaching the microphone. Thank you. No more speakers. Madam Clerk.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is 7:26 p.m. and I confirm we've received no emails during this time. You may move to committee input.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to council members. Any councilors have questions, comments on the presentations tonight? Councilor Wink?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just got a couple of issues that I'd like to raise or discuss. First one is what Jason was just saying about lot coverage, and greenhouses are limited to lot coverages of 30%. I believe that prior to the last zoning bylaw, it was 70%. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But question to staff is, why did the zoning amendment or new zoning bylaw reduce the amount from 70 to 30% coverage when we are supposed to be supporting our agricultural businesses, and this is impeding on what they can do with their businesses going forward? So if I could have comment on that, please.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. To the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first, to clarify what the previous bylaw allowed, it allowed a lot coverage of 60% for greenhouses. If there were other buildings, if you had a house, farm help, or other accessory buildings, then you could go up to 70%, but the greenhouse was restricted to 60%. So that's just to clarify. Why the change from the previous bylaw to the bylaw that got adopted by council? It was changed to 30% to be consistent with the policy in the town's official plan. The town's official plan currently has a policy that says greenhouses shall have a maximum coverage of 30%. So at the time, back in 2012, when the official plan was adopted by council, that was what was put into the town's official plan, and that's what was approved as well when the official plan was approved in 2014. So the zoning bylaw is required to be consistent with the town's official plan, and so that's where that came from. You'll recall that this was raised at the October meeting, and we did indicate that this would be something that we would look at as part of our update and review of our official plan, and, you know, to look at what is a more appropriate lot coverage requirement, whether there actually needs to be a specific policy in the OP, and then when the OP gets updated, we can then make a further change to the zoning bylaw.
To the councillor, thank you for that, Ms. Director. To the
Yes,
councillor.
So, this is trying to be consistent with our official plan that we are changing. What about other area municipalities? What are their zoning restrictions with respect to agricultural properties?
To the director?
Specifically with respect to greenhouses, certainly some of them have limitations of them, and I can tell you again from my experience in Niagara-on-the-Lake, it's 50%. I believe, off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and confirm, but you know, I think Lincoln is 70%. So there is a range that's out there in other municipalities.
So by the sounds of it, we're way under what other municipalities are. Also with respect to this, hoop houses are included in that 30%. And just wonder, they are temporary buildings, why are they included in that?
To the director, any comment?
So, Mr. Mayor, so we did not include a coverage for hoop houses in the zoning bylaw. So just to be clear, hoop houses are not restricted to that lot coverage requirement.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, councillor?
No, I'm not sure how other councilors feel with respect to the 30% coverage, so I'd like to hear some of their comments on this.
No. Shelley? I'm sorry. Council Nesnick?
That is my name as well.
Yes.
No worries.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, so just building off of Councillor Wink's questions. So I think the folks that we've received letters from and the concerns for farmers who are trying to grow vegetables and food in our community are feeling that they are being handcuffed if we wait for the policy, the official plan to be considered, which is supposed to happen either this year or early next year. Then we have to wait for the change of the bylaw zoning. We're talking 2 to 3 years out before they can actually put more greenhouses or more vegetables in their planting for us to be able to enjoy. So my question to you is there a process, being new, I'm not sure, is there a process where you can make a temporary exemption for lot coverage? I believe an exemption was made for hoop houses of some sort so that they were allowed to do more more lot coverage than was allowed. Is there some temporary thing we can put into place to allow farmers to plan for 2025 or 2026 so that they can start to bid on contracts so they'll be able to provide food for the citizens of Ontario, I guess is the question. I don't know if that's who that would be directed to, whether it be the planning or maybe our CAO could comment on that. I'm not sure.
I believe we should go to the Director of Planning, Mr. CAO. Yeah, okay. So I also want to remind Council that we discussed this back in September or October when we had a presentation made, and at the time the Director of Planning mentioned that we were going to be looking at this problem 6 to 9 months down the road, and at the time, most councilors thought that we could live with that time frame. Is that, again, back to you, to the Director of Planning, is that time frame still within reach? Or, let's first of all answer the Councillor Nesnick's question. Before we get to the OP itself, is there any way to do an extension or whatever to get to the 70%, or does it indeed have to follow the process?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I'm not aware of a kind of blanket exemption that we can do through zoning without doing a zoning bylaw amendment. To permit a higher lot coverage for greenhouses. So it's a good question. I'm just not aware if there's a way legally that we can do that. Certainly, the Planning Act does allow for temporary uses, and those uses can be temporary for 3 years, but this is something different where you're wanting to make this permanent. So we've had a number of discussions with the greenhouse growers about this over the years, and there is a process. They've not come forward and requested any changes to the official plan. They appeared to be willing to wait, but we would need to process an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, and we are in the throes of updating our official plan, and that when we bring that update to the official plan forward, we could certainly bring a amendment to the zoning bylaw at the same time. So that's been kind of what we have talked about in the past with council. That's what we would be prepared to do, and the time frame in terms of 6 or 9 months still, is still what we're working towards. So. That's where we're at.
Yep. Councillor, you had the floor.
Yes, so thank you, Ms. Weens. I think through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be wonderful if we could do them in tandem together. So I think that would make greenhouse growers, farmers happy, because to know that it would be expedited. I think that's what we're all looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerr?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess lot coverage is always a hot topic. I'm a bit, I support that there should be a higher lot coverage for the greenhouses, and hoop houses are actually considered a temporary structure. They're not considered a permanent structure. To my knowledge, I don't believe that they're required building permits to put a hoop house up at this point. So I'm not sure if they require a specific permit to build a hoop house itself. I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, to the Director of Planning on the hoop house issue.
Yes, it does require a building permit under the Ontario Building Code. It is a structure that's affixed to the ground. And if there's any type of heating in a hoop house, some of them put heating into them, then that's also a factor to consider in terms of building permit.
Okay, I find that somewhat amazing with the number of temporary garages that are Shelter Logic that are going up that are exceeding sizes all over the place, not just in Pelham, but across Ontario that are 20 by 14, which easily exists, the building size. And so in theory, all of those are going to require permits, even though they're sort of affixed to the ground. To remove them from the ground is not onerous. And I look at the fact of terms of the restrictions with hoop houses of being in use. The 6 months was discussed. I guess I will come back to the point that I think our greenhouse growers need support. The dilemma is hearing 6 to 9 months. I'm used to a lot of things. Of 6 to 9 months turns into 15 to 18 to 24 months to 30 months by mistake. And it's not against any one person. It's just the wheels move slowly at times, and it's really hard. I don't want to put Ms. Weens in the department saying, okay, by the 1st of September, you better be in front of us because the clock started. And I think that's a very dangerous position to put anybody in. It just puts too much work on them. So my instinct is that people complaining about non-compliance or non-uniformity between bylaw and OP is generally when you're trying to be more restrictive, because that's when they want to challenge things, is that we're being more restrictive, when in fact this is looking at something that's going to be less restrictive that the OP may correct in the future. Or if I have my way, the OP will correct in the future by having input. This will not be something that gets missed because it's critical. I do want to foresee a measurement in conjunction with the greenhouse people, because in areas that don't have restrictions, if you ever get a chance, drive to Leamington and drive down Highway 77, and they have 30-foot high greenhouse walls. You drive down a tunnel in your car and you look on each side and all you see is glass. To me, that's excessive, and that's really, really negative for everyone. So we don't want to get into that particular situation of saying it's unlimited coverage. I understand that particular side. And again, I have a thing relative to a fixed permanent greenhouse with heating and fixed boiler and everything else relative to a hoop house. To me, there are two very different entities, and predominantly hoop houses are used generally by nursery operations. They may be used by preliminary vegetable operations and those types of things, which are very different. They're small, they're not high in the air. So I would hope that somehow that we look at it, that the comments that have been provided to us, that we take that into account, that the hoop house really is a different creature from a greenhouse per se. I certainly couldn't propagate plants inside a hoop house in January. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to grow my vegetable transplants in a hoop house on the first week of March and hope without supplemental heat and everything else. That's just environmental and economic suicide. They're done in far more permanent structures. So somehow if we can find a way to deal with this separation of a fixed greenhouse versus that. The comment that was made, changing it to agricultural versus commercial, that's always been the juggling point of at what point is something a commercial entity versus an agricultural entity. If I'm actually husband of a crop, or I take care of the crop, that's agriculture per se. But you're trying to, at least by saying commercial, is somewhat, I think, build it into the Canada revenue point of you have to generate X amount of dollars in order to rationalize this as a commercial enterprise versus just being a backyard part-time, not being done for tax purposes. So that therein lies, and I have a challenge, Mr. Inga, I do. In agricultural versus commercial, I lean towards the commercial just because it gives more of a tone to it, to eliminate the backyard person saying, well, I'm agricultural, because that's a pretty open-ended thing. So I'm not sure how to clarify that one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? I see, go ahead, Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, to answer Councillor Wink, I think I was in favor of 70% at the time. And that's what I recall, that's what we talked about. And I'd still be supportive of that. I heard the comment about the parking for the other agricultural activities, namely the growing of chickens. I think that's correct, because you don't build a facility these days to have more employees. So if the parking requirement could be reduced to, I think it was 1,000 feet or whatever, 1,000 square meters or whatever it was. I think that would be a logical step as well. But that's the only comment I would have about that. Yeah, I'm more interested in making sure that we can create the conditions for our agricultural sector to succeed, and rather than restrict things. So I'd be in favor of less restrictions on the size of the space that they have, but not necessarily unlimited restrictions on it, or with no restrictions at all. So I'll leave that as that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. Any other questions? Councilor Hildebrand.
There you go, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a comment with regards to timing, but I'd like to concur with the other comments my other councilors have made. I'm looking at a notice I sent along to the director from Lakeside in the county of Essex, where obviously it had dealt with greenhouses and all the problems of trying to get these OP and zoning bylaw done. And my concern is that, yes, we want to get it all straightened out in time, but it seems as though all these official plans and zoning bylaws, once it hits the province and these other authorizing agents, timing becomes a big issue. We said we're going to get it done in 2025, but you know, when I see these kind of things coming up and they can't get theirs approved, what guarantee do we have that we're going to be making these changes? I'm concerned for the future of our agricultural industry when they're restricted by some of the things we have in place. So that's what really concerns me, because I don't want to be restrictive of the agricultural industry, and especially our greenhouse users and their position that they're put in. So those are my general comments.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Back to you, Councilor Wink.
Yes, so to get the coverage increased, it was suggested that we need an OP amendment along with a zoning amendment to be put in place. What type of time frame would we be looking at if we were just to look at that specific OP amendment? How much time would it take to put in place?
To the Director of Planning, please.
You're looking at 5 to 6 months for an official plan amendment.
And the OP, the new OP, when are we expecting that?
To the Director? Oh.
That's got it.
Well, I'm currently reviewing a draft right now. We're hoping to start public consultation on that in end of February, March. It will also go out to various agencies and town departments for review and comment. This is a bit of an iterative process. There will be back and forth. So we indicated we're looking at somewhere about between 6 and 9 months for that before we get to a position where we could have an official plan that is going to be acceptable to all parties and bring forward to council for adoption. So that's...
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to just circle back to your one comment that an OP amendment would take 6 months to get in place. What's involved in doing an OP amendment that would take that amount of time?
To the Director?
So again, we'd have to, at the staff level, we have to prepare the planning analysis and rationalization for why there is this change. We circulate the document again out to various interested parties, including commenting agencies. They have the opportunity to have review and input on it. We have to have a public meeting, and we then do the recommendation report and come back to you. So that process is about a 6-month process.
Councillor?
Yeah, I just, we're looking at one change to the zoning bylaw. I'm disappointed that it would take 6 months to get an OP amendment done. So that's just my comments.
So my one question is to the director, does the timeline change if an individual, instead of this council making the amendment, if an individual greenhouse appeared before council and initial, or whatever the step would be, I believe it's the council, would that speed the process up, or does it stay the same?
No, that is the process. From the
Oh,
time
okay.
of an application being made, it is about 5
Oh,
to 6
okay.
months to go through the
I
process.
see, okay.
We have agreements in place, working processes in place with other departments and other agencies. They are allowed a certain amount of time to review and comment. Understand that everybody is busy.
Yeah.
But, for official plan amendments, they're given, I believe, 45 or 60 days to review and comment and respond back to us. It is the process. It's
Okay, thank you for that, thanks. Councillor Kerr, you hadn't indicated?
Thank you. I guess I sort of have two things in my head. One is we have the official plan, and I look at it in kind of a global official plan. It's the official plan of all kinds of stuff. And then we have this small segment within the official plan. It almost seems to me that, and this may sound the Department of Redundancy department, which can be awful at times, is that what is desired in the final official plan that goes out relative to this particular part, if it could be dealt with as an official plan amendment to be built in. I understand, I realize it's going to create all kinds of havoc, and I'm trying to find a simple way around it to expedite the issue for agriculture, because like I said, that's all.
If I may, the way the official plan is currently written, it recognizes that greenhouses are an agricultural use, and they're allowed. And it says if the total coverage exceeds 30%, you need a zoning bylaw amendment. So if they're coming in and they want 60 or 70%, they don't need an official plan amendment, but they do need a zoning bylaw amendment. So, but in order for us to change our standard requirements in our zoning bylaw to be more than 30%, we have to get rid of that clause in our official plan. So that's where we need the official plan amendment. So the way the bylaw is written, it recognizes that you can do 30%, because that's what the OP says. If you want to do more than 30%, you're gonna need a zoning bylaw amendment. And then we can evaluate all things on the ground in terms of where's that building located, what are the adjacent uses, what are they doing with their storm runoff, how big of a pond do they need, where's their parking, what is the size of that, all of that gets looked at. So that, there could be instances where 70% lot coverage is too much on certain properties, and on other properties, it works just fine. So that is why the official plan is written the way it is.
Okay,
And, I just,
thank you.
we'll get there. We just need time. And I can appreciate where the greenhouse industry is at, but nobody has ever said to them, they're only restricted to 30%.
Okay, thank you. Back to Council Wink.
So those greenhouse growers that are pushing this, then if they want to push it individually, they can come in with a request for a zoning amendment.
Yes, apparently, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's always
Okay.
been the way it has been.
Thank you for that.
Okay, yep, thank you. Any additional words from the CAO, or?
Just to be clear, both processes, sorry, where they're talking about the zoning bylaw, the official plan, All of this is set out in statutory. It isn't that town staff or regional staff enjoy being difficult. And regardless of where we land this documentation, it's all subject to potential appeal to the OLT. I have more than 2 decades of doing this, and I have never been associated with a significant zoning bylaw update, as we did last council, that was appealed by the by, as many of you will recall, and that added a good, 8 months or so, I think it was. And here we're going through although we're talking about housekeeping amendments today, what you're really talking about is a bunch of stuff with the official plan. And when we get that done, it would be the first of my life that was not appealed to the OLT, if it is not appealed to the OLT. Right now, I have a flawless track record the other way. So everything we're saying somehow assumes that there's 100% happiness throughout roughly 18,500 human beings, which is as unrealistic as can be. The key takeaway here is that the 30% was adopted for a very good reason, which is that 70%, as Ms. Weens has stated, can be just fine on one property and terrible on another. And if the percentage is that high, then you can go in at 68% as of right, and it can cause real problems. And that's why, ultimately, why we advocated for a lower number. There's still a way to get there. Maybe 75% is okay on a given property, but to have a relatively lower threshold to make sure that when greenhouses are built, they don't negatively impact the neighbors. All of our delegations this evening, or at least the first one, are really focused around impact on neighbors in rural space, and it is a valid and real concern, and I think to a lesser extent that's, in fact, was each of our delegates this evening. So we're on track. The important thing is we are on track of both the zoning bylaw, housekeeping amendments here tonight before you, but also the OP. That work's proceeding exactly on the council-approved schedule, and you will have what is a potentially a viable, approvable document in your hands this calendar year. And whether it takes 10 meetings or 1 meeting, and whether someone appeals it or not, we don't know. But we are on track on both in approved and reasonable timelines. And the rest of it, we kind of have to wait for the time periods the law establishes, and it just is what it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Councillor Kurt?
Yeah, I guess, and the last part is relative to the parking requirements of stating relative per 1,000 square meters. With the amount of automation and everything that's gone on to greenhouse operations, the changes that have changed relative to rolling benches, conveyor belts and everything, the number of people that are operating inside a greenhouse per 1,000 square feet is far less than what it was in the last 25 years. I do think that that's worth taking a look at as the comment was made. If someone wants to add 9,000 square meters, they're not likely to hire 9 more people, because I can tell you 1,000 square meters of greenhouse will not pay for another employee unless you're growing a certain particular crop and dealing with an underground, let's say. But that's how I'm looking at it logically as a business person, saying, if I have to add a parking space, which is now paving and putting over and covering ground for the people that are unlikely to be there, if there's a way of taking a look at that, I think that would be, depending on the operation, which was brought up relative to chicken barns, all kinds of things. Automation is coming, which means fewer people that are going to be there on an ongoing basis, so the parking demands are far less. And money isn't made in a parking lot, it's made in the building.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And a couple of weeks ago, Councillor Olson and I toured a couple of greenhouses in the within 5 miles of here, and you're exactly right. They're a couple of $1 million expansion, and they didn't. And matter of fact, their labor is dropping. So for the life of me, I don't know why we can't just forget about the 1,000. Why can't we just say no on-street parking, or all parking has got to be on the owner's property? I don't know why, or no on-street parking allowed. I don't know why we have to be so specific. Why you just have to say the applicant is responsible for all parking. I don't know why we couldn't simplify something like that, but that's just my thinking. Now, we did have a couple other applicants here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Wink.
Yes, so I think we kind of beat up greenhouses for the evening.
Yes.
So I'd like to just get some staff comments with respect to Mr. Engel's presentation. Particularly with the changes in the EP zoning, the fact that he's in a situation now where technically he can't build unless he goes to a zoning amendment. And, you know, if we've got 640 properties or whatever the number is out there that we've changed their land designation, like, it seems very cumbersome and very red tape if we're going to have to ask for zoning amendments on 604 properties or 640 properties. So just like to hear some comments with respect to Mr. Engel's presentation, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I will turn to the Director of Planning again, Ms. Weens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, the environmental piece is complicated. So there's a lot of pieces to it. And Mr. Engel talked about conformity with the official plan. Well, we also have to conform to Greenbelt Plan, Regional Policy Plan, and Provincial Policy Statement, and so forth. It's not just our official plan. So some of the comments with respect to the mapping and how the mapping may have shifted or changed from what our official plan is back in March of 2022, when we circulated that zoning bylaw out, we circulated it not only to the public, but also to agencies and other departments. And we got feedback from those agencies that the environmental zoning mapping was not accurate and it needed to be updated and revised to be accurate, to conform to some of these other policies and plans and not just the town official plan. So that's what led to the change in the mapping from March of 22, was it 22 or 23? 22 to the June of 22. So those, you know, yes, and we, you know, came back to council with it and had a further public meeting on it. But you know, again, this is an iterative process, and so there's a lot of moving pieces and moving parts in it. And so that's the piece around the mapping and the reasons for the change. We had a lot of consultation with the public as well, and we had members of the public come to us and tell us, you need to put my property in environmental conservation zone, or, you know, so that, you know, there could be any number of reasons why the mapping changed. The one property that Mr. Engel talked about on the bottom of Effingham and why it was noted in a staff report. Again, that was because that property owner came to council and specifically made that request. And we went out, we field verified, and we confirmed with the agencies involved. And so that allowed for that change to happen. It wasn't just done as a stroke of a pen. So there were certainly, you know, public input, agency input that resulted in the changes to the mapping and the mapping coming forward to council in terms of what it was that you adopted. The process with regards to notification and all of that, again, this was a comprehensive zoning bylaw amendment. We had we did lots of outreach to the community. We had newspaper articles to inform the public. We had Tuesdays with Tara for a number of months where people were available to come in and talk to us. We kept running records of anyone that we spoke to. We made sure that they were notified. We put notices in the paper, but we did not individually notify property owners. That's not something that is standard when you're doing a town-wide update to any type of planning document. We did open houses in North Pelham, in Fenwick, at the MCC, here at Town Hall. Like, we tried to reach as many people as we could. We were at the farmers market. So I can't answer specifically why the Engels were not aware that we were updating our zoning bylaw at the time. They don't live in town, and but that's unfortunate that they weren't able to participate in the process. But the process was something that was very involved, and we went over and above any type of statutory requirements or on the notice for that process. The bylaw got adopted. The bylaw was not appealed by any other agency or group with respect to the environmental zoning. So we don't have any issue or dispute with respect to the environmental zoning currently today with the zoning bylaw. Now, there is a process, and it's laid out in the zoning bylaw, where we can refine the boundaries of those features and those elements through the preparation of an environmental impact study, through field visits and those kind of things, so that we allow for those refinements to those things without the need of going through a formal zoning bylaw amendment if you do your environmental impact study. And that's the process that we have available to us. And it was meant to provide flexibility to those properties that are impacted. But in certain circumstances, depending on the feature that's on your property, there is an absolute. There is no development. And that's been policy for 20 plus years. Provincial policy came in the mid-90s that said no development on significant wetlands, no development on significant woodlands. It's not new.
Okay. Thank you for that.
So, again, the zoning bylaw needs to conform to those policies. Yeah, they're in a tough situation. They've got Greenbelt Plan, Natural Heritage System, they've got environmental features. It's complicated. I grant you that. It really is. And we've been working with this with, a number of other property owners that, it comes up. They thought they could do something, and now the zoning doesn't permit it. But, quite frankly, it hasn't been permitted by policy for over 20 years. We're just catching up.
Yeah. Before I go to Councillor, I do remember that on the last council, I, for one, and I believe the rest of the council, was very impressed with the amount of meetings we had in the neighborhood and the amount of feedback we were getting from the community. I do know that I went to 2 open houses at the region, and you're talking 470,000 people, whatever, and there was 9 at one, and I believe there was 8 at another one. So, and that was during their official plan, new official plan. So you're absolutely right. This town did go well beyond the boundaries to make sure that we did get to a lot of feedback from our residents. So again, I'd like to thank staff for the, as you mentioned, all those meetings that we had. So thank you for that. Councillor Wink?
So just quick question, how much does an environmental impact study cost an individual? Just ballpark, like I'm not gonna hold you to a.
It really varies depending on the feature and what the proposal is. But, you know, you're probably in the order of, could be anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000.
Which is significant, I guess. The tough part on Mr. Engel's situation is before he bought the land, he came to the town and asked them about, if I buy this land, am I able to get a building permit? And he was responded to in the affirmative that he would be able to get a building permit. And then since that time, rules have changed, and now he's going to be out another $25,000 just to even get to the point of hoping for a building permit, which kind of seems crummy from my standpoint. But
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments on that?
Well, I don't disagree. It is crummy. You know, when they bought the property in 2019, yes. And, you know, had he come in and applied for a permit in 2019? You know, but I can't, again, in 2019, that's what was allowed. Today, we're talking about, you know, what's allowed today.
Yep, okay, thank you. Councillor Nesnick.
Yes, so thank you very much. So just for clarification for my own learning, lots of learning tonight, I'm looking at the addendum 5 that Mr. and Mrs. Engel provided for us. So I see over in the, where they've got the black little squares, there's a few properties there now that are 100% within EP1 zoning. So am I to understand, though, that there probably is already homes on those properties? And so if so, say the house becomes of an age where that home is no longer sustainable due to its age, can that home be torn down and rebuilt on that same footprint like they do grandfather other properties, or is now that like definitely a no-build zone without the environmental impact study being done?
To the director.
Well, like everything, that depends. Is the house going to be larger? Is it going to be in exactly the same footprint? Certainly if it's in exactly the same footprint, you know, that would be allowed. If they're making it larger, encroaching into a feature, you know, that probably is more challenging. So, you know, without knowing what the plan would be, it's difficult to say. Certainly the existing uses are allowed. They're allowed to continue. And that's, you know, not an issue.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr that committee receive report 2024-0016 information report, housekeeping zoning bylaw for information, and that committee direct planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on the housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment to Town of Pelham Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 4481-2022 for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. On the resolution, any more comments or questions? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Resolution carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda and that committee receive the verbal presentation made by the public.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor.
Any further debate? Not seeing any. All those in favor? See none opposed. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, that brings us to adjournment. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? To see none opposed, this meeting is adjourned.